Though vivas, which evolved after the separation of Ankiska and Striata, are still restricted to Serina's eastern continents, the broader Ardgoose family from which they descend has a cosmopolitan range. Though representatives here are not as diverse ecologically as their kin in the east, they still comprise a very wide variety of herbivores, among them the largest terrestrial bird anywhere on Serina by this time. In the sprawling tropical and temperate forests and woodland savannas of equatorial South Ankiska can be found a group of enormous browsing ardgeese known as Serestriders, some of which can reach heights of 40 feet and weights of several tons. Adapted to browse the highest branches of trees inaccessible to most other animals, many species have evolved necks that make up more than half their heights, in addition to long and robust hind legs. The body is carried mainly horizontally, and the stomach is proportionally quite large in order to effectively ferment a diet of leaves and branches without ruminating, as the more derived ceralopes are able to do. They lack the adaptations of their eastern relatives to chew their food before swallowing, and instead crop leaves and shoots whole with their goose-like serrated beak, then swallow the pieces whole and break them down in a large gizzard, aided by many pounds of rocks swallowed to aid in crushing the food to a gritty pulp before it is swallowed. Anywhere that forests grow here, Serestriders in some form are likely to occur in abundance, either living a solitary life in the depths of the shady forest glade, or moving in migratory herds of 100 or more on the plains, forced to move constantly from one patch of woods to another lest they deplete their food supply. A solitary bull elegant Serestrider browses peacefully upon the canopies of a bamboo woodland in the quiet of dawn, whilst largely still hidden in shadow, the sun just beginning to creep upward from the horizon. Able to reach leaves more than 30 feet above the ground, it has few competitors for food here, and at such a size, few predators are likely worry it, allowing an adult Serestrider to feed at a leisurely pace. In the event a large carnivore does threaten the gentle giant, it hides a secret weapon under its muscular arms. Normally folded out of sight, the bones of the hand have fused into a giant scythe claw, which lies hidden against its torso, which the strider does not hesitate to flash if pressed by unwelcome attention. Serestriders perhaps most notably differ from vivas in their reproduction. While vivas are extreme K strategists, producing only a single chick at a time and nurturing it through a lengthy childhood, Serestriders are oppositely extreme R strategists. Instead of one egg in a season, a female produces as many as 10 to 15 of them over as many days. Being too large to incubate them, she instead lays them in large mounds of sandy soil and decomposing leaf litter in forest clearings or the edges of jungles, where a combination of the sun and the heat gained from the decay of the plant matter will keep them warm, returning every day to deposit another egg into the pile with a long, extendable cloaca that can reach down to ground level and bury the egg into the soil. Every morning, the mother-to-be will return to the nest, pile another few inches of soil over the surface, and deposit an egg before moving off to feed, sometimes making a round trip of 10 miles or more every day to do so. Though she may guard the mound half-heartedly for as long as she is actively laying, once her last egg is dropped, she pays no further attention to the nest. even though she lays her first and last egg as long as 2 weeks apart. The chicks will typically all hatch within a day of one another due to the fact that the eggs laid even only a few days earlier and near the base of the mound in the spring will develop at a slightly slower rate than those laid later and toward the top of the nest mound, where the sun's heat is most direct. As females typically nest in close quarters to each other in favorable nest sites where the soil is soft and most suited to mound building, the result is that as many as several hundred chicks will emerge at once. The young are super precocial and fully able to run and feed themselves at birth. And though many surely are killed whilst emerging and in the days following, the sheer numbers of chicks are usually enough to satiate any local predators and ensure at least a small percentage survive the initial onslaught and escape into the forest. Serestriders are often spotted significantly far south of the tropics, and populations of some species may migrate even down through southern Stevlandia and into the Antarctic Circle during the summer, feeding in taiga forests, but all species must make the lengthy trek northwards again towards the equator to breed, for only here is the summer long enough to incubate their eggs. Some species may make this trek only a few times per decade, while others breed annually and do not stray as far away from their nesting grounds through the rest of the year. Though in their first few years mortality is high, once they near their adult size, Serestriders have few natural predators and very long lifespans, which give them time to skip a nesting season occasionally and still produce enough surviving offspring to replace themselves in the future breeding population. Serestriders reach sexual maturity much earlier than might be expected, between 10 and 20 years of age, often when they are nowhere near fully grown, though the males are rarely able to mate until much older due to competition with far larger senior males. Though they do eventually stop growing, this may not be until the age of 50, albeit beyond 25 years or so, the rate of increase each year slows dramatically. Adults may still make the trek to breed at advanced ages of 150 years, though fertility, particularly in females, is likely diminished far before this time. Males, however, remain fertile and may continue to sire offspring throughout their lifetimes, and thus the most common pairings are typically of very old males, which typically win mating rights due to their size, and much younger females. Serestriders are not even a little monogamous. Solitary species live lonesome lives, while in herding species, usually only immature young and adult females live together, with the adult males being pushed out of the group at maturity to live lives as loners or in loose bachelor groups. Most species are thus sexually dimorphic, with larger and more colorful males that compete for female companionship during the mating season. A particularly strong old male may oust every competitor in its range and mate with more than 100 females in a season, making many species highly reliant on migration to other areas to prevent inbreeding once these siblings and half-siblings mature. A pair of crested, double-barred cleaner finches clean a juvenile Serestrider. Though large enough that few other birds can prey upon them, there are hungry predators that gain their sustenance from the great Serestriders, parasites. Biting vespers take a toll in the hot summers, while blood-sucking mites can feed throughout the year, kept warm under their plumage. Covered from head to toe in fuzzy, hair-like feathers, and with necks so long as to be impossible for an individual to groom on its own, the gentle giants are a walking buffet to dozens of invertebrate pests, seemingly offered up for the taking. But this is not entirely true, thanks to another of Serina's endemic symbiosis. A variety of Serina's giant birds, but especially the Serestriders, rely on mutualistic relationships with far smaller insect-eating finches to keep their plumage clean of dead tissue and insect parasites. Birds such as the Serestriders are large enough that they themselves support their own small, portable ecosystem, of which their own blood forms the basis, and sparrow-sized insectivores fill the niche of apex predators. The Serestrider is so large that it seems to not even notice the flocks of small birds climbing all over their bodies and picking through their feathers, even when the finches alight on their snouts and pick at their eyelashes and into their nostrils. If an unfamiliar bird tries the same thing, however, the giant reveals that it clearly does pay attention, for it will quickly shake the intruder away, avoiding other finches that might potentially do it harm. Indeed, another group of canaries, aptly known as bloodpeckers, also frequently try to glean a meal from the large aardgeese in a much more harmful way. Thus, via convergent evolution, most cleaner finches that service the Serestriders have evolved similar markings and color schemes to show that they mean no harm. These patterns are often remarkably similar, even across totally unrelated clades. A bright yellow head and a blue body, with obvious black stripes running along the eye and down the neck. No one can say for sure why this pattern seems to have become the universal signal for a pest removal service, but whichever bird first adopted it has been mimicked at least 6 times in unrelated groups of birds across the Western Hemisphere, all cashing in on the same bounty of food. The system is usually mutually beneficial. The Serestrider is kept clean of pests, and the finches fill their bellies. But not all finches are friends to the giant. Some species mimic the coloration of beneficial species, but are actually parasites themselves, enlarging wounds to lick the blood, and even taking small pieces of living tissue rather than eating insects. Some of these pest birds evolved directly from formerly beneficial cleaner finches which went to the dark side. Others seem to have evolved independently from other lineages, including the bloodpeckers themselves, one species of which seems to be evolving to take on the same pattern, but to be not completely there yet. Without quite the correct shades and proportions of color, sometimes it is tolerated and sometimes shaken off aggressively by the Serestriders. With those birds that look most like the harmless cleaners being able to get a blood meal more frequently, the Serestrider is inadvertently cultivating a pest that will, over time, become harder and harder to distinguish and weed out from its kinder fellows, in a rare natural example of Pavlovian mimicry, or its animal equivalent. The true cleaner finches also perform another service to the Serestrider in eating aggressive bamboo ants that might be disturbed while the giant feeds on the host trees. While some species specialize in plucking ticks from the Serestrider's feathers or catching flies as they try to land and get a drink of blood, Perhaps the most specialized of all are anteaters, that spend almost all of their time crawling along their host's snout, where the armored beak meets the plumage. Here they snatch up any and all ants that rush to the defense of their host tree, killing them before they get a chance to bite or sting the sensitive skin on the Serestrider's face. The Serestrider is thus able to browse freely, and the anteater canaries allowed access to a limitless supply of food for almost no effort, as their host literally brings the food to them as they perch upon its nose. Bloodpeckers are a family of carnivorous finches native to the Western Hemisphere, most of which are parasites to larger animals. The group has its evolutionary origins far back in Serina's history, diverging from all of the world's birds more than 60 million years ago, and have been targeting the blood, skin, and other small bits of flesh from large flightless birds for as long as they've existed. Though some bloodpeckers feed opportunistically on insects, they have never specialized as insectivores at any point in their evolutionary history, and likely made the jump to parasitism from feeding on other birds' eggs and nestlings. Most of a bloodpecker's anatomy is fairly generalized and similar to other songbirds, though their toes have become zygodactyl, with two facing backward, in order to better facilitate the clinging and climbing on the bodies of larger animals, often clinging upside down on bellies and other areas their victims cannot easily knock them from. They are small and stocky, their wings are relatively short and their tails stumpy, and their heads often rather large for their size. Generally, because of these traits, they are weak flyers. The beak is tipped with a sharply angled hook, which is used to make small cuts into other birds' hide. Though they do take a fair amount of liquid blood, the bloodpecker's favorite food is the skin and underlying fat and muscle, which they cut from the wounds they dig out in tiny strips. This very nourishing food source makes up the majority of what they feed their nestlings. Because a bloodpecker can cause significant harm when it feeds, it does a potential victim well to be wary and drive off the parasite before it lands. The fear of the vampires likely a driving factor in the specific color patterns adopted by the harmless cleaner birds to make them immediately distinguishable. To make themselves less noticeable, most bloodpeckers are therefore nocturnal and cryptically colored. Guided by large eyes, they make their attacks under the cover of darkness when their prey are asleep, or at the very least, less able to spot them before they feed. Only the false cleaner finch, which mimics the colorful markings of a harmless cleaner bird, feeds exclusively by day. The actual feeding process is usually brief, with the bird landing and immediately getting to work nipping a small wound, then quickly slicing off a strip of skin and flying off. But through the course of a night, a bird will frequently return for seconds and thirds, joined as the hours pass by other individuals taking advantage of the injury, so that by morning, a prey animal may find itself with one or more quarter-sized wounds up to half an inch deep. A healthy Serestrider or other large bird quickly heals and will not suffer any long-term effects from the bloodpecker's feed, though old individuals are frequently pockmarked with healed scars from bloodpecker wounds under their plumage. But the birds can cause significant weakness to already ailing animals too weak to fend them off, in which case the birds may even be bold enough to attack in daylight. Bloodpeckers are naturally drawn to open wounds and the sight of blood, and will congregate on injuries sustained by other animals, even carnivores, to pick at the exposed tissue and lap up any flowing blood. Though the bloodpecker does cause injury to healthy animals, its actions of picking at already open wounds actually serve a beneficial purpose by removing dead, septic, or diseased tissue, as well as insect larvae, and cleansing the wound of infection. Relatives of the bloodpeckers are another group of carnivorous finches known as strackbirds, or colloquially just stracks, short for distracts, a name that only makes sense once one is familiar with their behavior. Unlike true bloodpeckers, the stracks don't feed on living animals, but still have a taste for blood. Rather, they associate closely with large predators, often riding directly on their backs, and assist the carnivores in killing prey by flying ahead of their host and harassing potential prey animals. Better flyers than their kin, they dive bomb other animals and peck at their eyes and ears in an attempt to distract them from keeping an eye on their surroundings while their host approaches and makes an ambush. Taking advantage of the chaos, the predator hopefully makes a kill before the prey can react and try to flee, in which case the small finches will swoop in and steal their share of the riches from the carcass, being small enough that the carnivore scarcely pays them any mind. In between kills, the stracks feed on their host's parasites in the dried blood that sticks in their plumage after a feed, serving a hygienic function sufficiently beneficial to the hunter that, for the most part, it completely ignores their presence. Unlike the other bloodpeckers, they are usually diurnal and often brightly colored in shades of yellow, red, and orange. From left to right: orange-shouldered strackbird, common bloodpecker, false cleaner finch. The orange-shouldered strackbird is a relatively large, thrush-like bird common across the grasslands of South Enkiska, where it associates closely with large carnivorous skunks, distracting herbivores to make them more vulnerable prey to its host, and scavenging any successful kills the carnivore makes. Common bloodpeckers, about as large as a zebra finch, are small, nocturnal parasites which target large forest-dwelling birds, feeding in small flocks under the cover of darkness. Its wings are edged in hair-like filaments that serve to dampen the sound of its wing beats, allowing it to flutter almost silently as it comes in for a meal. The false cleaner finch is a house sparrow-sized diurnal bloodpecker evolved to mimic beneficial cleaner birds. It hides in flocks of similarly marked cleaners and follows them from one Serestrider to another, while its company busily pick away the giant's parasites. The false cleaner opens up wounds and picks at the host's blood and tissue for its own sustenance. Both stracks and bloodpeckers are not always successful in their attacks, however, for some species of beneficial cleaner birds, in an effort to protect their food supply and therefore their hosts, will drive off other birds, both competitors and predators, that approach too closely to their chosen individual or herd. Similar to the battles that rage between Serina's bamboo trees and their symbiotic ant colonies, a similar evolutionary arms race has begun between different flightless birds and their own flying symbiotic partners. On the connected continents of South Enkiska and Stevlandia, predatory skunks, flightless, fast-running predator canaries are still abundant and diverse. They range widely in size, from shy, hen-sized forest dwellers upwards to some of the world's largest land carnivores, though the majority fall somewhere in the middle. They may feed on insects and arthropods, smaller finches, fish, and even other large flightless birds, but always use their large beaks to deliver the killing blow. The shape of the bill can vary significantly. Lanky swordbills grab smaller animals in a straight, stork-like bill and swallow them whole, while Tyrant Serins have a powerful crushing bite able to shatter bone. Small forest dwellers have a tweezer-like beak to pluck insects from tree trunks, while wading species spearfish with long, thin beaks suited well for stabbing. Some early skyks, which did not need to run at too fast a pace to catch the fairly slow and plodding giant canaries of the Hypostacene, lost their wings entirely, but this body plan wasn't as suited to chasing the faster prey that would gradually evolve soon after. All species to survive to the Cryocene descend from a more basal ancestor, which kept their wings and could balance better during high-speed chases, and thus the majority of extant species now retain fairly developed forearms and wing plumage. Unlike the banshees, modern skyks are usually endurance hunters. Rather than leap onto their prey in ambush, they run it down in the open. Though smaller skyks survive in the east, the largest and most impressive hunters are endemic to South Ankiska. The grandest of all are still members of the Tyrant Serin group, specialist predators of other large megafauna. They kill their prey by biting onto the neck and severing the spinal cord, the jugular, or the windpipe with a notched, serrated tooth on either side of their upper and lower jaws. Some cryogenic Tyrant Serins have become veritably gigantic, reaching weights of 3,000 pounds. Lacking a proper tail, like has reappeared in some of the vivas, they nonetheless do have elongated tail vertebrae that serve to lengthen the body somewhat and improve their balance. The rest, however, is dependent on their posture. As in most birds other than the vivas, the thighs are fixed toward to set their center of gravity further back, and their wings are used to steer. Giant tyrants are able to run at speeds over 25 miles per hour, sufficient to catch the other giant birds they prey on, such as young Serestriders. But it is the smaller species that really excel in this department. Certain smaller Tyrant Serins have specialized almost as avian cheetahs, compromising between two methods of running not normally seen in a single animal on Earth. Some are able to reach extraordinary speeds of nearly 70 miles per hour in short bursts, but also to run for more extended lengths of time at slower speeds, closer to 30 to 40 miles per hour, depending on the circumstance and behavior of the prey species in question. Others are complete endurance hunters, chasing herds of aardgeese in packs and picking off the weak that lag behind. The red-fronted Tyrant Serin, shown with a pair of commensal strackbirds in tow, is the heaviest skyke ever to live, and the largest land predator anywhere on Serina 65 million years post-establishment. Standing a little more than 7 feet at the hip, adult females can reach a length of 19 feet and weigh 1.5 tons. Hunting a wide variety of habitats upon South Ankiska, from the temperate forests to the deserts and the crashing hunting a wide variety of habitats upon South Ankiska, from the temperate forests to the deserts and the crashing seashore far inland to the dry savanna. They feed predominantly on Serestriders, picking off the old, young, and ill, but will consume almost anything they can catch, including carrion and ocean refuse. Male and female are broadly alike save for size. Males are only 2/3 the size of their partners. They also have more white around their eyes, with a brow arching over the eye and in some subspecies attaching to the cheek patch. Females exhibit only a white marking on the cheek and a similar patch under the eye. Both genders exhibit a cap of red plumage on their foreheads. Males attract mates and intimidate rivals with infrasonic courtship songs. Though inaudible to human ears, these follow a similar range of sound to that of the modern canary, simply at a far lower pitch.